You know, for over 114 years, Chevrolet has been so much more than just a car company. It's not just about cars. It's been an engine for corporate takeovers, a true icon of American culture, and, get this, a case study in how an absolute giant can fall to its knees and somehow learn to stand up all over again. All right, let's dive into this incredible story of survival and reinvention.
And to really understand the drama, we have to start right here. This is the absolutely tragic fate of co-founder Louie Chevrolet. This guy was a brilliant race car driver, an amazing engineer, but he sold his stake in the company way too early and never saw a single dime of the billions it would eventually make. The whole story really kicks off with a brutal lesson in business.
Now, let's fast forward almost a century, and the company is facing its own death. This year, this marks the absolute rock bottom. I mean, on June 1st, 2009, with over $172 billion in debt, the whole thing just collapsed. This wasn't just some numbers on a spreadsheet, this was a cultural shock, and it's from these ashes that the modern Chevrolet had to be reborn.
But you know, to really understand the comeback, you've got to understand the origin. Chevrolet wasn't founded to build a great car. Nope. It was founded to pull off one of the craziest, most audacious corporate raids in American history. The founder of General Motors, William Durant, had just been forced out by his own board. Chevrolet was his weapon to get his old company back.
Now, what's so interesting here is the fundamental conflict right at the heart of the company. On one side, you've got Louie Chevrolet. He wanted to build these powerful, expensive machines, things that reflected his racing background. But his partner, William Durant, he had a totally different idea. Build cheap, reliable cars, sell millions of them, and use the profits for his master plan. And those two ideas, they just could not coexist.
And guess what? Durant's vision won. Big time. He launched the affordable Series 490 to go head-to-head with Ford's Model T, and it was a massive success. He then basically weaponized Chevrolet's profits to buy up GM stock until, bam, he had a controlling interest. He forced GM to absorb Chevrolet, putting himself right back in the driver's seat. So from its very first decade, Chevrolet's destiny was completely tied to the fortunes of GM.
So after Durant gets kicked out of GM for a second time, a new leader, a guy named Alfred Sloan, steps in. And he didn't just have a plan for Chevy. He had a plan for the entire American consumer market, one that would change the auto industry forever.
And this right here, this is just brilliant. Sloan figured out that people don't just want a car, they want to move up in the world. So he created this ladder of aspiration. You'd start your life with an affordable Chevrolet. Then, as you got a better job, you'd move up to a Pontiac, then an Oldsmobile, a Buick, and finally, the ultimate prize, a Cadillac. Chevrolet was the crucial first step, designed to pull millions of families into the GM world for life.
And the results? Whoa, they were staggering. By this year, for the first time in history, Chevrolet outsold Ford. It broke the legendary dominance of the Model T. Sloan's brand ladder wasn't just some theory, it was a market-conquering machine.
This strategy kicks off a golden era. I mean, the brand becomes this cultural powerhouse, cranking out icons that literally defined post-war America. The Corvette was a technological marvel. The Bel Air, with its new small-block V8, brought style and speed to everybody. And the Camaro? That was born out of pure competitive fire, a direct shot at the unbelievable success of the Ford Mustang.
Through all of this, one symbol stayed constant, the bow tie. But where in the world did it actually come from? Well, the answer is surprisingly murky.
Okay, so there are three main theories floating around, and nobody knows for sure which one is the real story. William Durant himself claimed he ripped the design off some wallpaper in a Paris hotel. But then, researchers found a nearly identical logo for a coal company in a newspaper from around the same time. And a third theory says it's a nod to Louie Chevrolet's Swiss heritage. The mystery itself has just become part of the brand's legend.
But after decades of just pure dominance, the giant, it began to stumble. And the decline wasn't one single event. It was more like a slow-motion collapse, a series of warnings that nobody listened to that just ate away at the company's foundation. And you can see it right here in the numbers. At its peak in the 1950s, almost 1 out of every 2 cars sold in America was a GM vehicle. Think about that. By the late 80s, that number had plummeted as more efficient, more reliable Japanese cars flooded the market. The company was just losing its grip. And this timeline really shows how it all built up. It was just this pattern of getting caught completely flat-footed. The Corvair safety scandal destroyed its reputation. The OPEC oil embargo showed that its whole lineup of gas guzzlers was a huge problem. All these crises just built and built until the 2009 bankruptcy. And even after that, the massive ignition switch scandal proved that some deep cultural problems were still there.
Which brings us right back to 2009. The company's on life support, bailed out by the US government. But what happened next? It was like a masterclass in corporate emergency surgery, and they did it at lightning speed.
In just 40 days. Can you believe that? 40 days. The company was radically transformed. 4 entire brands, Pontiac, Saturn, Hummer, and Saab, poof, gone. 14 plants were shut down, and decades of legacy labor costs were slashed by over $10 billion a year. It was absolutely brutal, but it created a new GM that was leaner, faster, and actually built to be profitable.
And the new company had this laser-focused strategy. Just stop trying to be everything to everyone. Instead, pour all your resources into the things where you make the most money, full-size trucks and SUVs. The profits from Silverado, Tahoe, and Suburban would become the financial engine that would fund the company's entire future.
And that future is electric. So, let's look at the state of play right now. As if we were in the boardroom, how is Chevrolet's massive bet on electrification actually performing against its rivals?
Well, the data is pretty clear. While Tesla is still #1, no surprise there, by 2025, General Motors, driven mostly by Chevrolet, has decisively jumped over Ford to become the #2 seller of electric vehicles in the United States. And that's not a small move. That's a huge shift in the competitive landscape.
Now this is where it gets really interesting, because you have to look closer at the core business. While Ford's F-150 is the single best-selling truck, when you combine Chevy Silverado and GMC Sierra sales, GM actually sells over 100,000 more full-size trucks than Ford does. And in the super profitable full-size SUV market, it's not even close. GM has a commanding 60% market share. This dominance in gas-powered vehicles is what's funding their big EV push, led by the successful Equinox EV. And this is the scale of the bet. Through 2025, GM has committed $35 billion to developing electric and autonomous vehicles. This isn't some side project, it's the single biggest strategic transformation in the company's history. The key to it all is this, the Ultium platform. Okay, think of it as a common set of electric skateboards that can be scaled up or down to fit any vehicle, from a small SUV to a huge pickup truck. The whole goal of Ultium is to drive down battery costs until building an electric car is just as cheap as building a gas-powered one. And that, my friends, is the tipping point for mass adoption. Which leaves us with the ultimate question, right? Chevrolet has the factories, the dealership network, the brand recognition that these new EV companies can only dream of, but it also has a 114-year-old legacy to manage. The data shows its pivot to electric is working, but the final chapter of this incredible American comeback story, well, it's still being written.